Hello, friends at the Utah Jazz fandom, Twitter sphere, what have you. We are here live to talk about the post game for Jazz Blazers. And I'm currently getting things set up here. We're going to invite Isaac Adams onto the show to come chat. Isaac, I'll let you know when your video's up here. I'm going to add you to our add you to the live stream here. All right, Isaac, I believe we have you. Give us some audio to let you know you're alive.
I'm alive. I'm here. It's good game. Glad to win by 20 plus points. That's always much preferable to the close nail biter games or those games. Well, the nail biter games are more exciting, but or those games where you lose by 1 point to a team that you think you should beat. So happy with the end result, and I was really happy to see a lot of the passing. The Jazz were really moving the ball well tonight, especially Rudy just felt like he needed to do as many fancy passes as he could tonight, and they were working. So I was thrilled by that. And then one of my pet peeves all season's been along with Trent Forrest. I don't understand why he keeps getting these 3-minute stints that seem to accomplish nothing, but he got some extended time tonight. He looked good tonight. I'm not in practices. I'd still rather those minutes go to Butler because I think Butler has a higher ceiling, but I like Forrest. I'm optimistic about his future, and I was glad to see him have a good game. Beyond that, yeah, Rudy looked great. Donovan was really moving the ball. He was shooting great. Jordan Clarkson was having a great game again. My biggest complaint with the game was the Jazz kept failing to close quarters well. That's what happened in the end of the second quarter. They had a big lead, and then they just kind of let it get away. It's kind of happened again in the third quarter. Had the 22-point lead. It was down to 10 by the end of the third. But they did what they needed to in the fourth quarter, so I really appreciated that.
Yeah. Keep us going. I got one more to send.
No, you're good. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm covering everything I need to. One of the things that I found really remarkable, the Jazz's Achilles heel for years has been the small lightning guards. I'm hearing something echoing.
Do you have the live stream audio on your own computer?
I don't know. I shouldn't have it, but okay. It happened to start playing in Twitter, and that's where I got thrown off. My apologies. I just want to say it's pleasant to see that Damian Lillard didn't kill us. He's killed us for years, and just those kinds of guards, scoring guards like Lillard. Although C.J. McCollum had a great game, Anthony Simons went off against the Jazz again, and that was a little bit surprising. I guess it just wasn't Lillard, the one that was killing us tonight. But I'm glad. I was happy with what I saw with Lillard, and how the Jazz kind of controlled Lillard, especially defending on the perimeter tonight, was a lot better, even without Royce O'Neal able to suit up.
Yeah, thanks for opening us off, Isaac, because I got the social media spread out. I gave me a slight panic attack with echo. I would appreciate if anyone immediately in the comments hears an echo from me or Isaac, because that'll be a problem on my end that I'll have a panic attack. But that's why I have beer to slow my heart rate down, so I can panic while giving my body a healthy reaction. So you brought up a couple great points in that intro, and again, thanks. One, Royce is out. We'll get to that. Damian Lillard not going off, I thought was we can point to this as a Jazz thing, but as you've watched kind of like the NBA at large, Damian Lillard's struggles throughout the entire year is not a Jazz thing. He's really struggled to hit those step back threes. He's struggled to get up the amount of free throws he usually gets. He's struggled to, frankly, score at the rate we've seen him. The supporting cast hasn't changed too much that would affect his assist numbers, but I believe his assist numbers are down as well. And before you jump to new free throw rules, new basketball, or whatever, Damian Lillard's foul baiting has been more of the Jimmy Butler variety than it has been the James Harden variety. And what I mean by that is Lillard knows how to draw contact, like legit contact, and make sure the ref sees it. He doesn't hook arms. He doesn't It's mainly like when he gets a scrape along the arm, he really extends that elbow and makes sure that that scrape is really visible by the ref, and he gets those sorts of foul calls. And he's a really physical 6 foot point guard. He's like 6'2", 6'3", more or less. He's a little bit taller than Mike Conley. But his free throw drawing is not bullshit. So he's not getting the Trae Young, James Harden whistle, but his foul drawing is a little bit lower. That being said, this is something I talked about with Dan a couple weeks ago, which is maybe the refs are overreacting to all foul calls in that instance. What did you see from Damian Lillard's game today that made you think it was a Damian Lillard thing versus a referee thing versus a Utah Jazz playing awesome basketball thing?
Yeah, I haven't watched a lot of the Blazers this year to be able to really judge it. And just looking at his numbers this year, Lillard's just having a bad year. And it's not so much on the foul drawing as it is, the foul numbers are way down, but he's shooting 30%. That's far and away the lowest career three-point shooting that he's had. Hopefully there will be some kind of regression to the mean for him and he'll get back to being that killer. But part of what makes Dame's game so deadly is that he just hits those shots and this dagger after dagger after dagger, and it doesn't seem like it's there this year just looking at the numbers. And like I said, I haven't been able to watch them a lot. The one thing I noticed about Damian Lillard tonight is that I didn't notice him. And so I think that's more on Damian Lillard having a rough season than anything the Jazz did in particular. But he's been able to feast on the Jazz. And this is the kind of game where I'd expect him to try and, recoup that and to re-energize himself. And that just didn't happen. I think the Jazz's game plan was solid. I think that they handled him really well, but also he's struggling and you can see it.
Yeah, not noticing Damian Lillard is a great way to put it, Isaac. So many times it has been so backbreaking to see the ball in his hands every possession, and 2 out of 3 times it feels like he's getting a 2 or a 3 or an and 1, and then that 1 out of 3 is an offensive rebound by Nurkic somehow getting position, and it's McCollum hitting a layup, right? Damian Lillard is fantastic. I never really fret about his 48-point games like I do a Derrick Rose 50-point game, but you still should be a top-tier defense that can prevent those sorts of performances, and not noticing him. What a great way to put it. There were a couple key plays that were interesting that you could say, like, okay, Gobert got the better of Lillard. There was one block where he kind of nudged him in the back with an elbow, but it was called a clean block. But, how many field goal attempts did he end up having today? It was only 12 field goal attempts, 4 free throws. Like that is not the highest usage game you're going to see out of Lillard. He only had 2 turnovers. So I felt like the ball was in McCollum's hands a lot. I felt the ball was in Anthony Simon's hands a lot. I don't think Simons and Lillard play a whole lot together. Chauncey likes to kind of split those up. But not noticing Lillard, that's a great way to put it, Isaac. I don't think I could have put it any better, but I do think that the Jazz did a great job at preventing Apex Lillard. And it kind of starts with, I think, a point that Andy Larson made at the beginning, which was typically in a standard full-strength Jazz-Blazers matchup, you're going to have Royce O'Neal guard Damian Lillard. And I don't think the smaller guards are particularly great matchups for Royce O'Neal. Instead, we had Mike Conley guarding Damian Lillard because we've seen what small guards can do to replacement starter Joe Ingles. And Lillard's health, and he has an issue that stems from the Olympics. It's a chest middle body injury. I want to say it's a bruised sternum, but don't quote me on that. And I think that's carried over into, so he's kind of we're at 80% Lillard combined with a quick and healthy Mike Conley guarding him, going over screens and stuff. He doesn't have those free open range threes that are just backbreaking, where he's going to shoot 14 threes a game and make 6 to 8 of them. He only shot, once again, I'm pulling up stats I don't have in front of my face, but he only shot 4 threes today. That's not a thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm shooting a lot of stats at you, but I think it was like a Jazz defense at full strength against a Lillard that just, where is he?
Yeah, and, part of it is Lillard struggling this season, but he's still averaging 22 a game. Like, I bet that he was going to score over 20 points. I put money on that because I expected Damian Lillard to score over 20 points, especially against the Jazz with how they usually, defend against him.
That it
But
didn't
that
come
didn't
close.
happen.
Does that make you feel better or worse about your bet?
It makes me feel fine. I feel good about it. It was actually a single game parlay that had a lot of factors that didn't quite hit. So the other thing that didn't hit was Mike Conley. I expected Mike Conley to have some counting stats, and he just didn't. But that doesn't mean he didn't have a good game. 2 points, 2 assists, or let's see, how many assists? 6 assists. So I mean, he was there on the assists, but he wasn't scoring. But he's still plus 21 in the game. He was defending Lillard well. He was making an impact when he was out on the court. Even though he wasn't scoring the ball great tonight, he was passing the ball well, and he was, really dedicated to playing that defense tonight. And if it means Damian Lillard's not going off, but you miss out on some Mike Conley points, I'm willing to have that exchange.
Those single game parlays, when you hit them, you feel like, and I'm saying you as in like we, you feel like you're the most brilliant basketball mind on the planet. And then when they don't hit, you're like, that all just fluky things happened. But yeah, Damian Lillard only going for 11. That was surprising. And I want to jump right from that into. Well, I'll let you comment on any single game parlays you have or have not missed on. I know we both partake in the donating dollars to the gambling gods from once in a while.
Yeah. I try to make one with the Jazz on a consistent basis that is supposed to be a safe one, and I've yet to hit on it. It's like, I want Joe Ingles to hit a 3 and Rudy Gobert to get 20 rebounds plus points combined, which the 20 rebounds and points for Rudy Gobert is pretty much a given, although I missed on that just the other night. But I'm happy with the results tonight. The other day, I accidentally placed a large wager on the Grizzlies and ended up winning that one, and it didn't make it feel better. So, that's how those things just go.
Some folks, the way they like to bet is they bet against the Jazz, right? So, if the Jazz lose, then I'll get some money in my pocket, and I just think that's no way to live, right? Like it's double your happiness. Right, like if the Jazz lose and you lose money, it's like, okay, I'll skip something this week. But if the Jazz win, you're elated and you got $100 in your pocket or $50, like that feels super good. You go to bed like just all giggly and stuff. And I don't like betting against the Jazz. It's like one of the few rules I have about gambling is just as much as I love the sports and the betting and the stats, it's like betting against the Jazz just doesn't feel like I'm doing anything good for my health or my brain or my heart.
I'm willing to do it. It kind of takes the bite off of losses a little more when you hit, but it's usually more as like a hedge when I've already said, I think they're going to do it tonight, and for the most part, I try to stay away from anything on the win or loss side and just go with like, okay, how are the players going to perform? And that's done okay for me.
If I recall correctly, that Grizzlies bet was also fourth quarter bet, right?
Yeah, it was a fourth quarter, and I accidentally did $55 instead of $5.50. So,
the reason I asked about fourth quarter is like, when you're making like mid game fourth quarter bets, then you're really seeking to be like, this shit's gonna go bad for me, and then you can I excuse those fourth quarter I need to take the bite off bets a little bit more than like before the game. You're like, well, I'm going to take Grizzlies +5. I think the Jazz will win, but I think the Grizz will cover. Like, what kind of fun is that, right? But a fourth quarter bet where you're like, this isn't going great for the Jazz. I need $5 as you intended on the Grizz. But yeah, that's kind of like my betting intention.
Yeah, that's kind of how I do it. It's like, all right, well, things aren't going great. Well, maybe I can just take the edge off of it if they end up losing. And on that one, it worked out well for me, so I'm glad. But it's still like the loss sucked. I was really disappointed in the loss. I would have rather had a win.
The other point today will bring it back to the actual basketball that was actually played today instead of the money that Isaac or Mark has won or lost. Anthony Simons, big story for the Blazers. He's been a big story for the Blazers as like a conceptual ideal of like what the Blazers could be for several years now. I guess 3 years since he's been drafted. 10 of 15 tonight, 4 of 7 from 3, only 2 turnovers. And everyone looks at, wow, this guy is like, okay, he's really lighting the Jazz up. We're really struggling defensively. Now, there were some defensive lapses, especially in the second quarter, at the end of the second quarter, where the Jazz would make like a reaction to the first defensive play, play good defense, and then just not do anything. And then Anthony Simons would have the ball in his hands, and he would hit a shot. And when I say not do anything, the Jazz DNA still ends up like contesting these shots. So he would hit like a C- defended shot, and he ends up just on fire, and he's really shooting well. The defense gets better in the third quarter, and he's still shooting well against contested shots. And all of a sudden, he's just lighting the Jazz up. He might be the most disparate offense and defense player in the league right now. I don't use hyperbole lightly. I think it's exaggerated. I think it's bad radio, bad podcasting, whatever. But Anthony Simons is offensively, he's got that step back three. He's got the foul drawing. He's a really good offensive guard, small guard. I don't think there is a more disparate player as far as his defensive ability, and there was some real abuse of him defensively throughout the entire game, and he ends up at -6 in what ends up being a -22 game. So he was overall positive for the Blazers, but I don't think his presence on the court was alarming. Other than he hit some shots. Like, what are you going to do? I mean, on the other hand, Damian Lillard didn't. So I would say this: Damian Lillard's struggles and Simons' successes were a wash for the Jazz, if not a slight benefit to the Jazz, but not a 22-point benefit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that like Simons had a great game. That's good for him. When a bench player comes out and they're able to score on you like that, you tip your hat to them and you move forward. The game plan wasn't going to focus on Simons. He came in and he found those soft spots. He was able to hit shots and they went down. And so great for him, but you won by 22 points. He didn't make too much damage when he was on the court. I'm okay with that. What stood out to me more was that Nurkic, and that was part of the Jazz failing to close, especially at the end of the second quarter and the third quarter. It felt like Nurkic was just having his way with everything. Luckily, the Jazz kind of tightened that up. Nurkic was overall -15 by the end of the game, which still overall is positive compared to the -22, but Nurkic is the starter. Nurkic is the guy that's going to have more impact, and Nurkic is the guy that you want to see your all-star just neutralize. So Nurkic stood out to me more than Simons did tonight. Simons was scoring, and it's just like, okay, good. He had a nice game off the bench. We won by 22. I'm happy with that. Give a guy off the bench however many points he wants if we're going to win by 20.
There were a few Nurkic buckets. Great point about Nurkic. I thought, as much as the Twitter sphere, the media, whatever, talks about Jokic's successes against Gobert, which are voluminous, by the way, the game that Yusuf Nurkic played against Hassan White and Rudy Gobert today is the archetype of what you want offensively from your starting center against Gobert. It's Nurkic, it's Valanciunas. These guys, I don't know what it is about Eastern European centers, but they really provide the muscle against Gobert, I suppose. That you really need out of your center. Nurkic has played better defensively against other teams. I won't get necessarily into his defense with this comment, but there were a few times where Nurkic off the pick and roll, it's not like he posted up Gobert and took 9 dribbles and did some like Olajuwon hook shot or power Shaq move. It was pick and roll, deft move, or power move, similar to how a defensive end in football will surprise a tackle with a swim move or a power move and gets the ball in the bucket. It was like 4 or 5 times that happened out of his 9 buckets or whatever it was. And Gobert kind of gave like this head nod afterwards. Like, yeah, all right. Like, back the other way we go. He played a very impressive game, to your point, offensively. Defensively, Nurkic gave some or lost some on the table, off the table kind of thing. But I was also really impressed with Nurkic just because Gobert, he's going to give all these benefits defensively, and more often than not, he's going to get the better of Nurkic. But what you want out of your offensive center is to get you those buckets where he gets the ball about a foot or three outside the restricted area, makes a move, and more than half the time gets a bucket. If you're over 1.2, 1.3 points per possession, posting up on Gobert, you're going to do a great job. And I thought he was really impressive, to your point.
Yeah, I thought Nurkic had a great game. McCollum, he had hot streaks and cold streaks, but McCollum really showed up well tonight, in my opinion, and was the best guard, or at least amongst the starting guards. I guess you could give it to Simons, but Simons is going up against the bench more often. The Blazers looked okay with that, but in the end, the Jazz played a great game. And the really nice thing, and one of the reasons why there's been a lot of the sky is falling, and the Jazz have had some not great looking losses, although they haven't had any major big blowout losses. When they looked like they were going to, they scrabbled back, and I don't know how much that means. Garbage time, and then you get it back to 3.
It means more than nothing. It means more than nothing.
It means more than nothing. Yeah. But one of the consistent things that has stood out to me this early in the season is the Jazz are a high-quality shooting team. I mean, losing George Niang and replacing him with Eric Paschall and now Rudy Gay, now that Gay's healthy and back in the game, that's not enough of a drop-off for you to be like, what's happened to the Jazz three-point shooting? And tonight they had a really good, solid three-point shooting night, and it makes all the difference in the world. As long as they can start finding their shots, if Jordan Clarkson's shots are falling, then everything's going to be fine, because when the shots are going down, it helps on the defensive end. It helps them feel more connected on the offensive end. And I think a lot of the reason why it was happening was because they were moving the ball so well. They were passing. They were, they had the blender going, which it hasn't felt like they had been doing for a long time. I said multiple times this week before the Pelicans win, after the first Pelicans game when the Jazz lost, is like, I don't remember a really solid outing from the Jazz since October 31st when they beat the Bucks, and now they've had 2 in a row. I'm feeling a lot better about the team.
Woefully underhanded Bucks team, by the way.
What's that?
A woefully underhanded Bucks team, by the way. I feel like that should be mentioned as It felt like a great win, but when you look at the rosters, you're like, they felt like shit.
Yeah.
So a lot of great individuals and points you're bringing up here. I think the first one I want to point out is Rudy Gay, because he's providing, for me, that tingly feeling when he's on the court that I haven't felt in a long time. I'm not expecting him to score 20 points. I'm not expecting him to dunk all over somebody like he's 22. One of the most athletic players in the NBA in the past 20 years. It's just, I have this instilling of confidence when Gay's on the floor that I haven't felt in a long time from a substitute. We talk about, Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, 6 Men of the Year candidates. After that, and you mentioned George Niang, I believe, and Gay provides this more solidified presence as a shooter, as a rebounder, as a defender than Niang has ever provided. And you say, Niang he's a 90,000% three-point shooter. That's not what I mean with Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay could have the ball, take 2 dribbles, and his jump shot has improved so much that he has this very up and down shot profile, and he still has that athleticism for a very good jump on his jump shot, that he has more versatility with that three-point ability than Niang will ever hope to have. And yeah, I think we'll see more Rudy Gay 2 for 8 performances from 3 or 1 for 5, whereas Niang will always give you a 2 for 3, right? But I think that additional versatility is I get excited. I was not expected to be this excited about Rudy Gay. I thought we would get 8 points, 4 rebounds, go sit down. I think we have a real thing here with Rudy Gay, and I'm so excited to see him come on the floor. Do you have that level of excitement, or am I being way too excited about the 7th or 8th guy on the Jazz bench?
No, I think it's right to be excited about having that. The biggest thing to me is that he provides a perimeter defender that just has been lacking. And I know he's a 4, today and can play the small ball five, but he's just able to be out there at the arc, at the 3-point line, and provide solid defense in a way that I just didn't have the same confidence in Yang. And this isn't to trash on Yang or anything, although talking about him consistently, he's always going to give you those higher percentages. He was 2 for 7 tonight, although he's been great for the Sixers for most of the year. He had a rougher night tonight. But yeah, just looking at the Jazz, I've enjoyed the Hassan Whiteside experience so far. Hopefully that continues to last. So, like, when the Jazz have looked down, I haven't felt like, oh, it's Whiteside's not showing up and he's a drag on the team. It's the team as a whole that I've been disappointed in. And so you look at the Jazz 1 through 9. You've got Clarkson, you've got Ingles, who's starting to look chipper in the last couple of games. He's had a down season. Maybe that's the Olympics and going so hard for so long. But if Ingles gets revived, you have Ingles and Clarkson, Gay and Whiteside. That's a great 9-man rotation that I feel confident in if the Jazz are all healthy going into the playoffs.
You bring up Ingles starting, and I think we have two directions we can go with that. And one is Royce O'Neal not playing today. Again, nursing an injury, not serious. Back the next few games, we'll see when it happens. But also Ingles starting. And it's been a peculiarity over the past couple years. And I pulled up the stats, but I haven't analyzed them yet. So we want to do some live analysis, which everyone really loves in a live show, of Joe Ingles starting versus off the bench. But qualitatively, which is not a real analysis, and you and I are both attorneys, and no one likes qualitative analysis. Everyone jokes like, "Oh, lawyers are full of fluff and everything." It's like lawyers give our best arguments when we have stats to back us up, man. Like we need like real facts to argue things. But qualitatively, like just speaking from anecdotal, feeling, gut, had too many beers, whatever you want to call it, Joe Ingles starting feels like Australian Joe Ingles. He feels like a guy who is important to the game. He feels like a guy who gives a shit. He feels like a guy who enjoys talking shit to other star players and bring star players down to his level or bring them up to his level and really mucking shit up. Whereas off the bench, he's like, I will provide 22 minutes of adequate passing and adequate shooting, and I will go home and I will have a good night and I will make my $14 million a year or whatever it is. And I don't have a conclusion or a question. It's more like I really do want to pull up these stats that I've pulled up and say, like, is there something to this feeling? Is there a way that we can make Joe Ingles more an impactful player? Is he... I've heard a lot of podcasts mention a video game reference, which is force multiplying, right? I don't know if it's purely a video game reference, but I've been stunned to hear multiple podcasts that I didn't think were video game podcasts referencing force multiplying with Joe Ingles, or just force multiplying in general. And I'm wondering, like, we keep putting Joe Ingles on the bench as like, well, of course we want him to be that secondary bench facilitator with the bench guys. He's kind of superfluous on the starting unit as a fourth ball handler, but I'm wondering if he provides way more oomph as a starter as that fourth ball handler and just like really match up with the highest of tiers of opponent starting units and letting our bench unit do the talking, which requires a benching. I hate calling it a benching, but a 30-minute off the bench role for Bojan Bogdanovic. I don't have a conclusion. I don't have an opinion. I just think like there is something there to Joe Ingles starting that is felt in Jazz fans' gut for 3 seasons now, and especially culminating in the playoffs last year, that I'm wondering if you have a responsive thought to, or similar like me, like I don't have the stats to back it up, but I'm feeling the same thing or something different.
Yeah, so the first thought that I have is these last 2 games have been Joe starting in place of Royce O'Neal, and I think that is where the move would be if they decide to start him again and move O'Neal to the bench, but O'Neal still playing significant minutes instead of Bogey. But I don't know. I think that there's something to it. I think that there are a lot of questions with Joe Ingles. He's older. He's a very unique player. Very unique. He's the kind of guy that kind of plays to the beat of his own drum. And for a while there, when he moved to the bench role, it really, I think, amplified his ability to play. And now I think it's the reverse is happening. He's getting those starters minutes and he's really shining. But part of what happened in the playoffs last year, I think, is because he had to play those starters minutes when Donovan and Mike were injured so much towards the end of the season that wears him down. He is getting older. He is the kind of guy who's a big guard or, way oversized as the primary ball handler. And that kind of in and out, play after play burden on his shoulders, I think, can wear him down, and you want him to be fresh. So I think in the playoffs, I might think about starting Joe Ingles on occasion, but I don't think it's the thing to do in the regular season because I want him to have fresh legs.
As usual, you bring up stuff that I just have like a shitload of like dovetailing thoughts and whatever, and I want to try to organize them in my head. So here we go. You mentioned first that Royce O'Neal would be the guy to go to the bench. I want to pause that for your first comment, which was more about just like his work, or your second comment, which is more about his workload and where he could really shine and be effective, and not kill a guy and make him effective down the road. Which is, if you were to start, regardless of if you sent Bogdanovich or O'Neal to the second unit, he, first of all, on the broadcast today, they said that he has played 8 years with Rudy Gobert, and I have not looked this up. There's no fucking way that's true. I was like, what the fuck? Like, it's been 8 years of Ingles and Gobert. Is like, I think like 8 years ago, like, I was still in fucking law school, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think that's correct.
That's wild. That is wild.
Crazy how time flies.
And I know Ingles was like, well, first of all, he started very early in his career. And I know Rudy had a year of Corbin to deal with. But has it really been 8 years that we've had this? And it makes you kind of feel like, yeah, these guys have earned it. They've really earned this trip that they're on. But anyways, got me thinking more about Ingles and Gobert and pairing them. And in particular, how Quinn manages Gobert's 30 to 35 minutes, and then in the playoffs that becomes 37 minutes, right? Sometimes Gobert plays entire quarters versus this in and out and in and out that he does in the regular season. I thought that it made more sense, especially because it made more sense to combine Mike and Joe together with Rudy, like, really consistently, and say, like, give Rudy all these, like, and give defenses a lot of pressure of, like, Mike and Joe feeding Rudy into that. What I'm implying there is that Donovan and Rudy have never really had a thing together where you're worried about that connection. I mean, you're worried about the connection, but it feels a little less threatening because you know Donovan's probably going to shoot the ball or pass to the perimeter as opposed to that real true inside threat. And I'm spouting off, not giving a conclusion, but the idea is, does tying Ingles and Conley to Gobert and giving Donovan those reins to the second unit to just pummel those poor backup bench guards make a little bit more sense? And it's one of those like experimentations that I would love to see. Just like let's see it happen. So the next topic I want to bring up is who you send to the bench. But first I want to get your comments on like what that kind of looks like, having 4 ball handlers in the starting unit.
No, I think having the 4 ball handlers, the thought that you just had about just making it so that Donovan has more minutes apart from Rudy, and one of the things that I was paying attention to tonight, and maybe it's just that I was paying attention to it more than anything that stood out in terms of strategy the rest of the season or in past years, was the minutes that Jordan Clarkson and Donovan Mitchell were playing together. And I think that it helped both of them, that there's this kind of threat of this guy could absolutely go off, and the Blazers had to worry about both of them, that just kind of gave that freedom with Whiteside in the middle. Donovan seems to have good chemistry with Whiteside. I agree, and this is my biggest complaint with the Jazz having some disappointing performances. I don't mind disappointing performances where it looks like they're trying new things, where they're experimenting, where they're kind of doing, and you can't just follow the same roadmap the Bucks followed last year. But that's what the Bucks did. They started to experiment and move things around, try new defenses, and try to be more versatile so they would be better in the playoffs. And that experimentation paid off for them. if the Jazz were showing up and being, disappointing, but it's because they were trying something new and different kinds of looks, that feels so much better than when it's like, okay, this is what the Jazz normally look like, and they're just not hitting shots, and they're just letting themselves relax and letting other teams take advantage of them. So that's not really exactly on point with your question, but the main thing to me is I want to see them experiment. If they're going to show up and try new things, then I'm all for it. I don't care if it means a few extra losses, if it's giving us new looks and experimenting with how best to maximize this offense and this defense, this team.
Well, I do think that is on point to my question. It doesn't have to be a direct answer to an unfairly direct question, right? And that leads though to the next question, which is, okay, if you think Ingles should have a shot at starting again, limited minutes, because you don't want to kill the guy, and frankly, he just can't. And maybe you don't even have him close the guy. One of Nate Duncan's favorite questions is, well, what's the closing lineup for the Jazz? I don't think that differs from the starting lineup. I do think there's something to Joe Ingles starting. That being said, the guy you bring off the bench I do think should be a variable. I don't think that's a static question either, and I think it's unfair to suggest that Joe Ingles starting means that one guy always has to come off the bench. And I do think there is some experimentation / matchup dependent coaching. Oh my goodness, where have we seen that? Not with Quinn Snyder's Jazz, that's for sure. Where you have Royce O'Neal starts against a team, I know he's injured, but against a team that has Kawhi Leonard, right? That's his archetype. That's his guy that he can defend, that is his matchup, and that is not Bogdanovic's matchup. If you're starting a team, a game against a team without a power wing, like a Kawhi Leonard or I deign say LeBron James, but I don't think Royce matches up particularly well against him either. But Bogdanovich gets the start, right? And we've seen Ingles guard LeBron like as competently as one can, which is great.
Pre-Jazz days, we've seen Bogdanovich guard LeBron pretty well when he was with the Pacers.
Yes.
You see
where I'm going with this.
I think that, it should be matchup dependent, and I think one of the things that I would emphasize, like, Royce, I love him, and he takes consistently the toughest assignment night after night after night. I don't want him to take the toughest assignment when that toughest assignment is John Morant, when it's Damian Lillard, when it's the quick guards, Trae Young, who just, like, busting on the Jazz. Like, those guys, Royce O'Neal has shown time and time again, are kind of a weak point. He's not the best defender against those kinds of guys. I don't know that Joe Ingles is the answer. I don't know what the answer is there, but maybe those are the games where you say, okay, we want Joe Ingles to start. Let's put Royce as the guy on the bench this game. And Joe, I think, has that mindset as a ball handler, as a lead ball handler, where he at least understands what the point guard might be doing to defend point guards a little bit better. Neither of them.
I got to stop you there because after watching Jamal Murray torch Joe Ingles, and having 1.5 seasons since then, I just don't think Ingles being the defender is the answer. I don't think Conley is great at defending John Morant these days, but as we kind of saw again against like a 75-80% Lillard today, I do think his quickness at least eliminates a scoring option for Lillard, which is the around the screen pull-up three. I think that Ingles and O'Neal are too big and too cumbersome to get around the Nurkic screens to really defeat the Lillard pull-up three. Like, even if they go over, they're not going to stop the pull-up three. Whereas Conley's quick. We saw Conley blocked a shot the other night. I almost took like 9 shots because of it. Like, he blocked around the screen shot because that dude, he's 80 billion years old, but he was quick. And he stopped the pull-up shot around the screen because he went over. And I do think that you're trading off that quickness for Bogdanovich coming off the bench. Holy shit, that dude will murder bench units.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer there is. I think that the answer is probably, and it's a bit of a mystery to me still, I like Trent Forrest. I'm optimistic about Trent Forrest. I think the reason why Trent Forrest is getting his 3-minute stints in so many games is because he has that potential to be that defender when needed. The break glass in case of emergency. This point guard is just burning us. Hopefully, either Trent Forrest or Jared Butler can develop into that point guard stopper that we need, because with the burden that Donovan Mitchell and the age that Mike Conley's at, they need somebody to be able to stop those fast guards, and it's just been a sore spot for the Jazz for a while now.
It absolutely has, and I got to give a shout out to my colleague, friend, good guy, Ben Gaines. If he's going to drop a comment on YouTube, then I'm going to respond to it. He says that Ingles did memorably shut down Kyrie in the second half back in like November 2019. I do remember that game because I forget things like birthdays and things my wife has said to me, but I do remember random things that Ingles has done well defensively. And I do remember that game, which is Kyrie had a little bit of Jordan Clarkson in him, if I recall that game, which was like he had Ingles, but like he was Kyrieing it a little bit too much. But at the same time, Ingles is not like Anthony Simons. I totally ripped on Simons earlier for good reason, because that guy is poor athletically and doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Joe Ingles is at least tall, long, strong, can't move laterally so well anymore, but really knows what the fuck he's doing. I think he can defend point guards. It's the idea that if you're facing Kyrie Irving today, right? Not regarding what Brooklyn team he's on or what vaccines he's had besides polio. It's more about what can Joe Ingles do today, and how do we maximize the Jazz team defense? And I don't think it's Joe Ingles guarding quick point guards. I'm burping and hiccuping because I've had half a beer. No, I've had like 9 more than that. But I just don't think it's Joe Ingles guarding quick point guards. I think he's capable, and so like when you talk about like bench units and like where Joe Ingles is capable, if you give me like a shitty bench point guard, like yeah, throw Joe Ingles on him, and he knows all the tricks. He knows what like a bench point guard learned in college from like Mike Krzyzewski. He's gonna he knows all that shit, and he's gonna snuff it out, and he's gonna do well defensively against backup point guards. I just don't want him in the end of a fourth quarter, again talking about the closing lineup, like guarding Jamal Murray over a Nikola Jokic screen. I just don't want to see that anymore. So when we talk about like who's best at defending that, when we talk about bringing Ingles in the starting lineup, I'd rather remove the pull-up three-pointer with Mike Conley's still A-plus quickness than Joe Ingles' length that maybe doing whatever the length can do.
And I wonder if maybe that's why it maybe feels better to me to have Joe Ingles be a starter when you're going against those kind of quick guards, and have Royce as the one on the bench, coming off the bench, would be more that adding that extra, the extra playmaker, and to be frank, the extra offense that Joe provides, just maybe it brings enough of the pressure off of Mike and Donovan that they can just increase what they're doing on defense. Because really, the guys that have the athleticism and the speed and the ability to stop those quick point guards are Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley, age given. And they need to be able to focus more on defense during those stages. And if they have Joe Ingles out there kind of just taking a lot of the pressure or more of the pressure off of them on offense, it allows them to hone in more on defense. And maybe that's where I'm getting this like gut feeling that just Joe Ingles is the answer in the starting lineup in those kinds of matchups. And I don't know. Quinn Snyder knows the game of basketball far better than I'll ever know. And to an extent,
well, that's what we're poking at, though, Isaac, is like he knows the game of basketball, but I think he's dialed in. 2 seasons ago, I should say, he dialed in that perfect lineup rotation that we're all really geared into. Is like he's really figured out how to just win 50 games as a team. Our question, which we raised at the beginning of the show, that you raised at the beginning of the show, is how do we win the title, right? And it's this sort of like experimentation that we're seeking. And Quinn might know in his heart of hearts that this isn't going to work. But I don't think basketball is a zero-sum game where there's a solution and there's a failure. I mean, look at tonight, for example. If Damian Lillard shoots a decent game, Anthony Simons has a bad game, and Jordan Clarkson has a 3 of 10 game rather than a 6 of 10 game, this is a tie ball game. We're going to overtime, right? Those are all reasonable things that can happen. So you have to approach these things as like what gives your team the best chance of winning against different types of lineups, and treat this when you have a deep team like Utah, like we go 9 deep with good players, and we go 11 deep when you talk about players that could like just reasonably could just give you 6 minutes of not like totally fucking up. You almost have to approach it like a football matchup where sometimes a player is going to get 70 snaps or 60 snaps or 50 snaps instead of their usual 14 because your opponent just doesn't have a matchup for the guy you have on the bench usually. And you have a deep team, you have a quality team, and I don't think they might be too proud, but I don't think any of Ingles, Bogdanovich, or O'Neal are too proud to say, you know what, this might work in a playoff matchup. And the last thing I'll say about Bogdanovich, and we can work towards our conclusion here, is Bogdanovich is a little older. If you move Bogdanovich to a bench role, he might pout. He might not take it well or what have you. He's old enough and he's expensive enough that if he says that, well, putting me to the bench jeopardizes my chances of re-signing with Utah after my contract is over, okay. Like, I'm speaking super, like, GM mode about this, but I don't think Bogdanovich getting soured over the idea of being benched in certain lineups is, like, a death knell for the Jazz championship odds. If Quinn wants to experiment, he should have free reign to experiment, and he shouldn't be burdened by player roles or what have you at this point.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that this team has shown that they can maximize the regular season. They've shown their potential. They've shown that they have certain weaknesses that consistently show up, although I'm still a believer in last year's team. I think that a healthy Mike and a healthy Donovan change everything and they make the finals. And I think that the Jazz match up very well against the Bucks. They've done very well against the Bucks for the last 6 years. Like, it's something that I think things could have turned out very differently with a healthy Mike and a healthy Donovan. But that's all hypothetical. That's a counterfactual. We will never get to see that. They've developed enough, and we saw what their weakness was against the Clippers. We saw what their weakness was against the Nuggets, allowing the Nuggets to come back. We saw what their weakness was against the Rockets 2 years in a row. And they need to do the experimentation. And I don't know that it's, hey, we need to have a small ball center option in Rudy Gay. It's that they also need to know, what are we going to do to shut down the quicker wings and the perimeter players? What are we going to do in these situations? And that just takes experimentation. And it takes some guys sitting on the bench for a little bit. And some guys coming off and moving those things around. And the only little bit of experimentation I'm seeing this year, for the most part, has been Trent Forrest getting 3-minute stints. And 3 minutes of Trent Forrest isn't the answer to what ails the Jazz in the playoffs.
Especially when he's not going to play in the playoffs. Like, you need it was interesting to see Forrest get longer stints tonight, because it was kind of like, okay, Forrest, what can you do in longer stints? That is I don't want to derail us too far, but you brought up a great point of, like, that's not experimentation. Like, if Forrest playing is helpful, but if we're going to develop a guy over 3 minutes a game, or 3 minutes a half, I should say, it's not Trent Forrest.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see things. Hopefully, they do some more experimentation, and I think this team is absolutely up there in the tier with contenders. I hate that the Golden State Warriors appear to have resurrected themselves. But it's all about the playoffs, and this team has shown, like, they haven't lost big, and every game, like, they can consistently win big. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of profile you want to have. If their shots start falling, which tonight looked good, I think the Jazz are going to start to look a lot better, and it's going to be, okay, is it the Suns, is it the Warriors, is it the Jazz coming out of the West? And hopefully they have an answer for the Chris Pauls and the Stephen Currys of this world, for Devin Booker. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but tonight was a good night. Going back to the actual game that happened, But they got burned a little bit by Anthony Simons. They were getting burned by C.J. McCollum. I want to stop that kind of thing from happening. The loss to the Grizzlies. Ja Morant causes the Jazz problems. Jamal Murray causes the Jazz problems.
It just tells me that we need to be doing this podcast or postcast more frequently so we can catch up on the last few games instead of just the game that happened, because that has been a concern over the past few games, and we'll see if the Jazz are up to the task. We got an interesting Jazz season ahead of us. I think this was a game that I think a lot of people are going to ignore when they either espouse the Jazz successes or call fire that like things are on fire and things are a problem. I think this was a more important game than folks are going to realize as far as like what this team can be, what this team is, and who can contribute in which locations, especially with having Royce O'Neal out. Like, what does the rotation look like? Who can contribute? It was a really important game, and the Jazz get the win, 129-107, a 22-point win, got down to 10 or 12 points in the fourth quarter and end of the third quarter with some Anthony Simons heroics, which again was who was getting abused defensively. Good win at home for the Jazz. You go home feeling happy. Isaac, are you happy about the Utah Jazz?
Tonight, I'm happy about the Utah Jazz. I was happy about them against the Pelicans. I feel a lot better tonight than I did about a week ago. So,
well, good. I just want people to go home being like, yeah, the Jazz won. I feel okay.
Yeah, it's always good to get a win against a divisional opponent. The Blazers, I don't trust them this year. They haven't been having a great year, but it's always good to get a win against the Blazers. So I'm happy tonight, especially when you're missing a starter, to be able to go up and shut down Damian Lillard like that. It's a good night. Yeah,
rare you're going to get Damian Lillard held to 11 points. Again, combination Jazz defense versus, is Lillard all right? We'll find out, watching the Blazers more, I suppose. Isaac, we get better at this every time. I love doing this. It's fun to finish a Jazz game, win or loss, and I have someone to talk to, man. Like, this is so fun for me. I hope you're having fun chatting with me about the Jazz.
Yep, I enjoy it, even if there aren't many people tuning in yet. Hopefully this will keep growing. And
we got some comments, and we've had 4 concurrent followers the whole day. I'm thrilled. I'm having a good time.
It's getting bigger.
All right, cheers, man. I'll have a good night. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good night. Thanks.
See ya.